We're going to look at components of fitness, but first I want you to think about what is fitness. So fitness refers to the ability to meet the demands of life safely, effectively, without exhaustion or under any stress. Okay, so fitness is a multi-dimensional concept, and the level of fitness is one of those areas that is influenced by so many different things, such as your physical, what we look like, mental, how we feel psychologically within our brains, emotionally, and hormonally. So how we feel in terms of the hormones and our body's chemical makeup that's made up of what we're made of. And then we go into the idea of our medical, social and spiritual needs, because all of fitness is a whole holistic approach to us as human beings. If we look at physical activity as a first concept, it's defined as our body's ability to move and produce movements in terms of contractions of the skeletal muscle. An issue around not having enough physical activity, whether it's playing sport, going to the gym, overall just walking or low intensity exercise like that, it causes loads of risk factors, and one of the biggest is chronic heart disease. 1.9 million people in the world globally have died just because of chronic heart disease, and that's a big onset risk to not moving enough. If you don't move enough, your body won't need to use the energy that you eat and consume. So when we think about components of fitness, we break it down into two different components, health related and skill related. When we think about health, it's probably the fundamentals of fitness. So in terms of physical fitness, emotional, mental well-being within fitness, social fitness, and all those things that I just talked about earlier about medical and spiritual come to define total fitness as a whole. What we feel, they all sort of come together to create the whole package, and they all influence each other. So if we go and enjoy a part of sport with our friends, it's building our social and our mental, and then that also affects us emotionally, releasing endorphins, reducing cortisol levels. All of these are hormones that our body releases in a reaction to different circumstances. So when our cortisol levels, in terms of that hormone, are increased, it allows for a response within our body to store fat and increase stress. More stress means more unhealthy people. So we want to be able to reduce that cortisol levels, reduce that stress. And a massive factor about how to do that is by being involved in physical fitness, whether it's playing sports, getting involved in the gym, training, or just moving more with your friend, going out for little walks subtly down the park or around the beach. You can engage those hormones and reduce them. So it all has a round circular motion in terms of controlling and impacting each other. Now what we want to think about in terms of physical fitness and break it down to the physical fitness base of it is that's broken down into our cardiovascular, muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, and our motor fitness. So motor fitness is the terminology about locomotion and what we do in terms of movement. Everything that we do, whether we move our bones, move our muscles, is locomotion. So it's the act of moving, and the way our body does that is through contracting muscles. So to contract muscle, we've heard it before through the duration of this program, is we use a substance called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So if we don't have any of that in our body, then our muscles cannot contract. So it's our ability to create fuel to be able to resynthesize and recreate that ATP for us to be able to contract our muscles to do what we need them to do. Now, if we break down that physical fitness, emotional fitness, and our well-being as a total fitness and look into the different compartments of it, looking at emotional, mental, and our social, medical, and nutritional aspects of those, what we put on our body and what we feed ourselves directly impact everything around us. So if you're going to feed yourself with junk food and oily based, poor nutritional valued food that's not got a lot of nutrients and micronutrients and vitamins and all of those concepts and different little things, then that's going to have an adverse effect on you as a human being. It's going to make you feel worse. So the worse the food is, the worse you're going to feel after a certain amount of time. It's going to increase that fat stores in terms of how much calories, the calorie balance within ourselves. So there's a massive misconception with food and intake at the moment around, if I just have a base food in terms of eating fast food like McDonald's and KFC and all those foods, I'm just going to gain loads of weight. But that's not right in terms of what we look at nutritionally and scientifically. So if you look further into the body and the science behind nutrition, we look at calorie balance and calories in and calories out. So it sounds a poor way to explain it, but if we look at what we eat, as long as we work it off in terms of the energy and the calories that we expend, then we're not going to gain weight. So we're technically in a healthy calorie balance called a calorie deficit or a calorie maintenance. Okay, the only way we're going to gain fat with eating poor food and nutrition, or any type of food and nutrition, is if we're in a calorie surplus. So that's eating more calories than what we actually need and what we burn off, so that we tip the scale in terms of what we expend, and we have more in than what we actually need. And what we look at that is, if you take 1 pound of fat as a substance, that equals 3,500 calories. So if you spread that across a week, in terms of what you eat, 3,500 calories, if you eat 500 calories extra every day than what you actually need, you'll get to the end of the week and you'll have a surplus of calories that you didn't need. Now, what's that's going to do to your body is your body's going to digest that and absorb and store that as adipose tissue, as fat. Also, if we don't think about that, it's also going to aid the hypertrophy in terms of our muscles if we're training alongside that. So if we add putting ourselves into a calorie surplus and putting ourselves into the gym in terms of creating hypertrophy and tension within our muscles to cause muscle protein breakdown, and then we eat the food to cause muscle protein synthesis and that restructuring and atrophy of our muscles, then we're going to get bigger in size and more dense muscles. So that's how we look at how our muscles can grow. But it's also got an adverse effect. If we eat too much and we're not training, it's going to get stored as fat because there's nowhere else for it to go. If we look at the medical side, it's impacted in everything. So if we look at the social side, if we don't get enough social interaction with people, we sometimes get the feeling of low self-esteem, low self-concept, not knowing what we want to do, who to communicate with. Us as human beings, we need to communicate with people psychologically, and it's all about the environment you put yourself in. Whether you talk to people that you work with, talk to people that you live with at home, or just strangers around that you might meet and meet new friends. It's always a good interaction for you to learn and develop yourself emotionally and socially. So with that social side, developing, talking to people, you counteract the psychological implications of not socialising, not exercising, and that can cause adverse effects medically. So we talk about mental health being a massive factor at the moment in terms of we can't really control talking to people all the time. We don't really have the ability to eat the right foods. If we don't go to the gym, then we're going to start thinking poorly of ourselves. We're going to have low confidence, self-esteem issues again, and we're going to start having mental health issues, which can form anxieties and depression, which is an adverse effect of missing out on all of these things that are healthy within our bodies. Okay, so if we break down the components of physical fitness into their little compartments, we look at flexibility as the ability of our joints and joint complex to work in a full range of movement. So when we look at movements within the gym in terms of bench press, chest press, leg press, squats and all those different movements, each joint allows the movement around that joint. So if we talk about a bicep curl, if I curl my arm, my elbow allows that flexibility. Okay, if I didn't have the flexibility for my arm and it was started there as naturally, then I have maybe a 15-degree range of movement that I'm missing out on to fully extend that bicep. So to go from one point to another point in a full range allows that muscle to flex and extend and contract. in that full range. Motor skills is our next component that we look at. The ability to perform a range of skills such as balance, coordination, speed, agility, power and reaction time. All of those components actually, if you put them together and work together, they create what we would call as performance in terms of an athlete. If you look at a certain football player or a rugby player, they all need elements of those to develop within training, within a game scenario. So a lot of the fine motor skills that we see in elite sport, or just you playing Sunday league or anything like that, is from working on those fine motor skills, whether it's from a young age or from when you're in your teens, or going through those motions in training when you want to try and get into that elite level, or just for practice times and getting some exercise at the weekends. Our next component that we think about and consider is cardiovascular fitness. So cardiovascular fitness is the ability of the heart and lungs to take in and transport oxygen for our body to then utilise it. Okay, so our muscles use glycogen as an energy source, as well as ATP is the only thing that allows it to contract, but ATP is then resynthesized by various different components such as oxygen and glycogen and ADP and creatine phosphate. So we need oxygen to be able to do long distance running and to be able to get that oxygenated blood around to the working muscles to do extra parts of workouts that are taking a longer amount of time for us to then resynthesize that ATP over a longer period of time. And our next concept is muscular strength. So muscular strength is the ability of a muscle or a group of muscles to use maximum force to exert and lift or to move an object. So we work on muscular strength a lot of the time in the gym, whether it's moving from point A to point B with a weight. Powerlifting uses a lot of strength and power to move a weight from point A to point B. But we combine strength and hypertrophy together, because to get the muscle benefits in terms of muscle protein breakdown and to get that stimulus to grow muscle, you need to apply variables that increases progressive overload. And overload we talk about in terms of increasing the weight on the bar. And to lift that weight on the bar, you need to be strong and develop that strength. So hypertrophy and strength come hand in hand together in developing one and the other. Our next concept that we think about is muscular endurance. Now, muscular endurance is slightly different than strength. It's still muscular because it's our muscles that are contracting to allow a rep range. If we look at the gym side of it, we might look at muscular endurance between 20 to 30 reps or even further than that, depending on how many contractions we make to do that actual exercise. So if we look at what athletes would use muscular endurance, we can think about a tennis player doing this movement over and over again for a tennis match. They might do that about 200-300 times within a game, a backhander and a forehand shot. So they're going to have to develop the muscular endurance to be able to use different forms of fuel to resynthesize that ATP over a period of time, as well as getting that muscular strength and power within that muscle to hit the ball as hard as they can. So these components of fitness, they work together. They're not separate. So you can use muscular strength, muscular endurance, and power and speed and all of those different concepts all at the same time to do different movements in terms of what you want to achieve within your physical exertion.